All right, guys and gals, part 2 of the Jig Series. This one is going to be covering football heads and tubes, okay? Now, football heads are obviously a deep water, clear water kind of thing for me up here in California. I fish them on reservoirs or deeper water lakes. Tubes you can fish just about anywhere, and so we'll get right into it. Hey, thanks for tuning in for part 2 of the Jig Series. Today we're talking about the third jig in our series, the football jig, and number 4, the tube. So let's talk about the football head and how I like to rig it. So this is just a straight brown football head jig. Obviously from the shape of the head, you can see it is shaped like a football with that line tie there on the front. Again, weed guard. This was the one I was using most of the day yesterday while we were out fishing. Caught a few fish on it. So the way I do with that, I like to always use with these a Yamamoto twin tail grub. It's just my preferred trailer for these. I know people use other things, whichever. Anyway, I like to rig them similarly to I like to rig my flipping jigs and my arky jigs, where that bait curls around a little bit. A lot less pronounced on this one than on the other ones. And I will often trim the skirt back on a football jig so that it comes right to the bottom of where that trailer separates, where the end of the main body of the trailer is. It just tends to give a much more bigger poof when it's dragging on the bottom like that. So anyway, this is the football head jig. The second one we're going to talk about is the tube. Now this is one of Reaction Innovation's big tubes. It works well. You can rig it with the typical tube jig head, which you can see is just a lead head with the hook, straight shake hook with the line tie. You slide that tube up and over it, just like this. And then when you get to where the tube head is all the way to the front, that jig head is, you simply press on the plastic there, exposing that line tie. You can see it's there, it's popped through. Then you would tie onto that. Now you can see that this is bunched up. Now what I would do is I would just simply pull. I'm not going to do it right now, but I'll pull to it so it just tears up just a little bit to match up where that hook is at. Or if you wanted to, you could thread it through, but it's not necessary. Now what I did talk about and what I did show you guys was my other setup. And I like this one a lot. You can flip it, you can pitch it, you can do whatever you want. We're using that flipping head jig without the skirt, still got the brush guard on there, and just rigging a tube up on there. And this is I believe this is the Strike King coffee tube. So I just run it on there. I run it back through like I would any other trailer. And really that thing, it's great for flipping in cover. It's great for throwing in deep water, and it just works well. So that's part 2. All right, jig number 1 today, 3 in our series, is the football head. Obviously named because of the shape of the head. I've got it paired up with a Yamamoto twin tail grub, and I'm going to show you how I like to fish it. So I'm going to cast it out on the same point we've been fishing some other stuff here. Again, I'm throwing it on 20-pound P-line Halo fluorocarbon because that's my preferred jig line for most lakes and reservoirs when I'm fishing deeper water. So now what I'm going to do with a football head jig is I'm going to let it hit the bottom. I just cast that thing into about 25 feet of water. By the way, it's over 100 degrees today. It's hot. The fish should be deep. So now once it hits the bottom, I'm going to do a sweeping motion with my rod parallel to the water, and then I'm going to repeat that. I'm going to reel down, I'm going to gather up that slack. And obviously it wasn't quite ready, or we're getting blown away a little bit. Again, reel down, get the slack, and I'm going to pull that sucker parallel to the water. And I'm just going to keep repeating that. Now what I'm going to do a little different is if I hit a rock, if I feel a little resistance, I'm going to give it a little pop. And I'm going to let it set back down, and I'm going to start that motion again. Okay? And that's a great way to get this thing through some heavy cover. Like rock piles or maybe around a log, something like that. So again, just cast it a little bit shallower. Gonna give it lots of line so it can get to the bottom. You know, give it plenty of slack, because otherwise you're gonna get that pendulum effect, right? So you gotta give these jigs, when you pitch them in, when you flip them in, you gotta give them enough line to get to the bottom. Otherwise, what's the point of flipping a flipping jig into some trees if it's gonna end up 3 feet away from it once it hits the bottom? So now we're reeling up. I've got good tension on the line. I can feel my jig. There's a lot of debris in the water, as you can see. Now I'm gonna do this sweeping motion. Just parallel to the water, sweeping motion. Now I know this point, I'm very familiar with this point. There is some trees, some stumps, there is some logs, there is even some rocks on this sucker. Again, I'm trying to find those because that's where the fish are gonna be at this time of year. So I'm gonna reel down again, and I'm gonna make that sweeping motion with the rod. Now, when I get a fish on a football head jig, what I really do is I do a side hook set, almost like you would do with a crankbait. Now, these are fish deeper. You can't get that same good vertical set. Plus, if you watch the rod, look how much more hook set ability I have for the swing. I can get 3 times the amount of swing out of this rod by doing a side hook set in comparison to a straight up and down vertical hook set like I can with a flipping jig or maybe the archy jig. So, you know, when it's deeper water like that, you really need to get that more aggressive, longer, deeper hook set. So that's how I fish my football head jigs. Again, sweeping motion, bring that rod back, kind of do it again until I hit a stump or a rock, give it that pop, let it settle back down, and then start that motion again. The speed will vary depending on the day, but that's the general sense of how you use a football head jig. Okay, jig number 2 in today's video, or number 4 overall, is a tube. Now, I fish my tube a little bit different on certain lakes. This is actually one of those Pepper Pro heads that I was showing you earlier, one of those flipping heads on a tube. Now, what that happens to do is that gives me a weed guard here, right? And it gives me a little bit more weight than some of the tube heads. Now, the typical tube head, if you're not familiar, let me show you. Got one right here. Okay, the typical tube head is something along the lines of this, right? Now it's a tube. The weight is up inside the head. You push the bait through the jig head and the hook up into the tube body itself. Then you push the line tie through, and then you tie it on, and there you go. This is a Gets It tube. They're very good tubes. I like the coffee tubes by Strike King. They work well. So this is your typical tube head. But the one, like I said, I'm fishing today on this lake because I've had a lot of really good days on using the other style, is the one with the jig head on it. Okay, now I'm gonna fish this just like I would fish a jig. I'm gonna fish this just like I would fish the football head jig. I'm gonna drag it. Okay, so I don't need to show you guys how to do that again. Tubes can be fished a variety of ways. The fish will hit them on the fall if you're using the right weights. Again, hot day today, it's 100 degrees. So with this thing, I know they're gonna be on the bottom wherever I'm gonna find them, or suspended over deep water, so I wanna get down to them. So this is a unique tube setup. Try it if you're fishing some heavy cover. This thing will work great. It comes through very cleanly because there's nothing to hang it up. So this is our second jig today, 4th overall for the tube. Keep watching. Hope you enjoy these videos. Hit like and subscribe. We'll get video number 3, the last in the series, out, where we're going to be covering bladed jigs and swim jigs.